From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
And we've returned. Question here. When's the last time you guys looked at your smartphones?
Couple seconds.
Couple seconds ago? What about you, Noel?
Literally just like 1 second ago while we went to the commercial break.
It pops up as we're sitting here recording. I've got it kind of over to the right, and every once in a while it just lights up when an email comes through. I'm just like, okay.
Catches your eye, right there. It's like a beacon. It's always calling to you.
Right, and it's designed to do so. It's very successful in pretty much any country that has widespread smartphone use. You will look increasingly odd not being on your phone, right? You forget your phone, you go to the airport, and you're standing in line, not looking at your phone, just sort of staring off into space like a psychopath. Are you counting the number of trash cans, you lunatic? Right? It's unusual now. And I think this is an important thing to think about when we look into our last story, the iceberg that somehow is also a web, because I made the worst metaphor ever on air. It's this. There was a massive data leak recently that uncovered human rights abuses on an enormous scale. We do not know at the time of recording, we do not know how widespread this is. We don't know how many people died as a result of this, but we will give you the ins and outs of the story. There's a outfit you may not have heard of called NSO Group Technologies. It stands for Niv, Shalev, and Omri. It is an Israeli technology firm that created a spyware program called Pegasus. Pegasus is scary because no matter how good your security is on your phone, whether you have an iPhone or an Android or something else, this stuff can be covertly installed without you having to click on anything. It enables keystroke monitoring of all communications from your phone. It also allows the user to track phone call content and track location. It allows the user to hijack a mobile phone's microphone and camera, turning it into a constant surveillance device. This has been rumored. Stuff like this has been rumored since the advent of these mobile devices. However, this is absolute proof. This affects multiple things. We don't know how far it goes. We don't know what exactly tech companies can do to stop it. But I'd like to give us just a little bit of a timeline as we dive in. So first off, NSO was founded in 2010. They've been around for more than a decade now. And they claim that this technology they're selling is to authorized governments, and this will help them combat terrorism and organized crime and stuff like that. But according to several reports, including a piece by Amnesty International, software that was created by NSO was used in attacks against people you wouldn't ordinarily consider terrorists. People like journalists who were reporting on human rights abuses. People like human rights activists who are reporting on human rights abuses. There's a little bit of a pattern, is what we're saying. There's also evidence that, not conclusive, but there's evidence that we can trace the use of Pegasus to the murder of specific people, such as Jamal Khashoggi, who was vivisected, dismembered while alive by the Saudi government. The U.S. refused to do anything, and as we record today, the Saudi government has experienced no repercussions for this state-sanctioned murder. There was another journalist that we'll get to in a moment who also was pretty definitely murdered by people using this software. And this brings us to the first debate. So now we have the lay of the land. I wanted to ask you all, Matt, Noel, Do you think NSO should bear any responsibility for this targeting, for these human rights abuses?
It's tough, man, because they built a weapon that they assured everyone would only be used by, government officials, by
Oh,
intelligence agencies.
that's what they say about all that kind of stuff. That's what they said about the face scanning software, radar detectors, and tasers. It always, you make the thing with the best of intention. You're still responsible for it if it finds itself into the hands of bad actors.
I agree. I'm just saying it's not clear cut, right?
No, it's not. I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying, like, it's something we see historically, that PR line of, oh, we made this only for, the use by, seasoned professionals in X industry. But that's not how technology works. I mean, you don't always get to keep the genie hidden behind the paywall or whatever,
Yeah.
The fire can burn you as easily as it can warm you or cook your food, right?
Mm-hmm.
There you go.
And
But
anybody can ride in a car.
But we have seen, at least my understanding, Ben, in several of the cases where someone died, even though it's unknown if this Pegasus had anything to do with their actual death, but Pegasus was used on several phones or close to several people, like you said, Khashoggi and some other journalists, where it appears that there was a state actor looking into one of these individuals, and then they ended up dying.
Yeah, exactly. I'd like to thank the excellent reporters at The Guardian, specifically David Pegg, Paul Lewis, Michael Safi, and Nina Lakhani, who all collaborated in breaking this story. What kind of terrorists are these governments hunting once they get a hold of Pegasus? Oh, people like lawyers, religious figures, academics, business people, diplomats, heads of state, senior government officials. That doesn't quite sound like ISIS to me. And this reporting is ongoing now. I highly recommend checking out a story that broke just yesterday by Paul Lewis over at The Guardian. And from what we can see, they're going to continue reporting. Pay attention to them, because over the next few days, they'll be revealing identities of specific people who have been targeted. They're also going to be drilling down into how governments rationalize spying on their citizens, how these seemingly innocuous processes can become something dangerous. The problem right now is, if you want to know whether the phone of someone whose number appears on the leak was actually targeted by a government or whether it was successfully hacked, you'd have to get a hold of the phone. You'd have to pull a little habeas corpus and do some forensic analysis. But the journalists have already found, because journalists talk to each other, their colleagues, they've already found some examples of phones that contained signs of Pegasus activity. And we know that right now, this appears to be the most extreme kind of counter-espionage measure since 2013, since the days of Edward Snowden. And now we get to the web, some web parts. Because right as this story broke, the United States and the United Kingdom released accusations that China was behind a big hack in Microsoft Exchange. This is causing some of the more cynical people in the global crowd to say, hey, what about the fact, basically proven this software has been used to kill people, which you can't say yet about the Microsoft Exchange hack. So were they trying to get people to pay attention to something else? Also, what about Julian Assange? One of the witnesses in his case recently said they lied. They lied because the main goal is to get him extradited to the US, where he will die in prison. A lot of stuff is happening in the sphere of technology and espionage now, and I think a lot of people need to learn more about it. One thing is obvious: while NSO Group may not be aware, just to be overly fair, maybe they aren't aware of what's happening, right? Maybe they're like an international arms company that, as you said, Matt, sells weapons and then says, "Oh, I didn't. Oh, wow, those missiles explode. That's nuts."
Yeah.
We call it. They
It's
are
a- it's
decorative lawn sculptures.
It's a feature, not a bug. It's intent.
Yeah,
They-
it's like when you go into the head shop years ago and you had to say, "Oh, could I try out a water pipe?" And you would
For
get kicked
smoking
out.
tobacco, please, sir.
Right?
How
Or you get
dare
kicked-
you?
Yeah, you get kicked out if you called it a bong. So there's a lot of like this idea that it is used for national security may be true, but what it's looking like right now is that it also is being used for a different definition of national security, which is to keep a current regime in charge, to enforce a status quo up to and including fatal measures.
Yeah, keeping that regime secure is what it's all about.
Well,
man.
Paul Lewis, in that article, Paul Lewis refers to NSO as what? Developers of weapons of mass surveillance or something like that.
Mhm.
Little callback to the Bush administration.
And this is an on-demand service. The market for this kind of stuff has blown up. It's bigger than NSO. The reason people are talking about NSO right now is entirely because of this leak. That's the reason it's happening in a critical way. But if you look back through the record, people have been raising their hands about the dangers posed by this technology and lack of oversight for quite a while, for years. It's just now the surveillance has hit the fan, if we want to style in the old cliche. I guess if we're going to be fair, NSO Group has responded, and they have denied any kind of complicity. Of course, they've said, we have vetted people. We have not only we've not only like vetted our state actors that we're selling this to, but the stories about this are either exaggerated or they're making false claims, wrong assumptions, uncorroborated theories. We see ourselves as a group on a life-saving mission, right? Which, that would be the idea. You could prevent the next terrorist attack, maybe even the next 9/11 before it occurs. That's amazing. That is, you are literally saving lives at that point. But the question is one of proof. It becomes devilishly difficult to prove that your actions prevented something that would have happened. Like for instance, if you had, on a microcosmic level, not to get too psychic powery about it, but what if you had a really terrible dream that one of your friends or your family members was going to be in a car accident the next day? You wake up, you call them, and you say, "Hey, don't drive to the I'm thinking of something ridiculous. Don't drive to the Beanie Baby convention, or don't drive to the Quesadilla Con because I had a dream you were going to get in an accident," and they don't drive, so they don't get in an accident. Does that mean you're psychic? Not really, right? And this is different because the technology is provable, but the best.
But what if there's a carbon monoxide leak at their house and they only got affected because they didn't take a drive that day?
Exactly. What if you accidentally killed them? So, right, you start to try to unwind the mass of chronology and timelines involved. The best argument for NSO's position at this point would be proven cases wherein a terrorist attack of some sort or an organized crime initiative was prevented, but they also claim that they don't receive the information that their customers get due to privacy concerns. But it looks like the Khashoggi family was definitely targeted using this software, not only before his murder, but after his murder. So they kept an eye on him. This is per Amnesty International, and this is despite repeated denials by the NSO Group. So were they simply unaware that this was occurring, or what? You know what I mean? What are the alternatives?
It's a good question. Are you saying that you think there may have been active cover-up?
There's definitely an active cover-up of the Khashoggi death. The U.S. is participating in it.
Well, but you said, I mean, the idea that they were not aware this was going on. That seems very unlikely to me.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't know, because I think it's maybe a tall order to say like, oh, you all knew exactly what you were doing and you just said you're fine with it because the money was good enough and you rationalized it. It seems unfair, but it's not looking good, because I would say how much leeway do you have when you say, to the missile thing, I designed these. I designed these missiles. I sell them to people for their defense. I am not in charge of where they get detonated, right? And that's something, legally, that's something the world has kind of agreed on now. A firearm manufacturer is not held responsible for firearm deaths. And you could go to any number of different industries. I think firearms might be a little controversial for people, but if you think about it in these terms, like what if Facebook sold a surveillance tool, and what if people began using that to stalk, harass, and possibly assault or murder their former lovers? Right.
Well, that's an interesting point, Ben, because I think the firearm connection is interesting because firearms kill people when they work as advertised. Other things, like other products, if a toaster blows up in your house and kills you, that toaster company probably would be liable for that. So what happens when technology that exists for one purpose is then co-opted and used for a different purpose? Is that the responsibility of the company to safeguard against these potential negative uses? It's a very tough question, and not really, it depends on the situation. There's not really an easy answer to that. Because obviously there are safeguards in place to keep, maybe children from shooting themselves or shooting others with safety, precautions on guns. But again, when the gun is used as intended, it kills people.
So in this case, again, this is an emergent story. In this case, it's important to note that we're going to learn more very soon. We don't know how far this goes, but the Amnesty investigation as of yesterday identified at least 180 journalists in 20 different countries who have been targeted by this spyware between 2016 and July of 2021. And they're including some places that are pretty famous for repressing journalists, like Azerbaijan, where if you were a journalist in Azerbaijan, good luck. I don't know what else to say. This gets hairy very quickly.
Or in parts of Mexico. There's a lot of reporting.
Yeah. Yep. There's a journalist named Cecilio Pineda. Their phone was selected for targeting just a few weeks before he was brutally murdered in 2017. Another investigation identified at least 25 Mexican journalists who were targeted over a 2-year period. NSO has said even if Pineda's phone was targeted for some reason by state actors in Mexico, data collected from his phone didn't contribute to his death, which seems like an interesting distinction.
They didn't find his phone, though. So there's all kinds of stuff in these where, like you said earlier, if you don't find the phone, you can't prove that Pegasus had anything to do with locating the phone in the moments leading up to the death, right? So any state actor can now, if they have access to Pegasus, can carry out extrajudicial killing as long as they remove the cell phone from the crime scene.
Mm-hmm. The perfect crime, right? It's terrible. And this may be something we explore further in the future as the story unfolds. It seems that this sort of information warfare, mass surveillance, is only set to accelerate in not even the years, in the months to come.